The prosecution close to wrapping its case in the Murdaugh double murder trial. Right now, they are in recess after playing an interview police held with him back in August of 2021, 2 months after he allegedly shot and killed his wife and son. If the prosecution rests today, Murdaugh's defense team could begin its arguments as soon as tomorrow. Joining us now with the latest out of that courtroom, criminal defense attorney Phil Holloway. Phil, first off, your top line thoughts on what we have seen and heard in that courtroom today. What are you learning?
Yeah, well, good afternoon, Sandra. Great to be back with you. Look, I think the prosecutor has painted a very, very devastating picture of guilt against the defendant, Murdaugh, in this case. So the defense certainly has its work cut out for it. If it's going to create reasonable doubt in the minds of these jurors, they have, I think, two things that they need to focus on, at least two things going into the defense case. Number one, Sandra, is they need to see if they can rehabilitate the alibi. As we recall, state's witnesses have come forward and said, look, we hear Murdaugh's voice on that video, which places him at the scene just moments before the fatal shots were fired. That was devastating. So maybe they can put the defendant on the stand to say, hey, I didn't do it, I wasn't there, and maybe explain that. Or maybe in the alternative, or in addition to that, they can have witnesses who might say, I hear those voices, I know the defendant, and I don't believe it to be his voice. So they might can bring other witnesses to sort of put it another way, to give the jury perhaps some reasonable doubt. The other thing that they need to do is they're going to have to try to neutralize this evidence of all these other crimes that he's said to have committed. The defense is going to need to remind this jury that those are charges for another day, another jury, another courtroom in another case, and that they need to decide this case on its own merits, because quite frankly, and I've had a problem with this, I don't really understand how the evidence of all these other crimes paints a line in terms of motive to this particular crime. And if the defense can further put the leaves on that tree, so to speak, they might be able to get some residual doubt that will spill over and perhaps be reasonable doubt in the minds of at least one juror.
Those are fascinating insights. Maggie Murdaugh's sister, so Murdaugh's wife's sister, his sister-in-law. This was a really interesting moment when she noted that it was odd that they never discussed between them the person who is actually, or who could have actually committed these murders. Listen to this.
We never talked about it. We never talked about finding the person who could have done it. It was just odd.
Because naturally one would assume that your wife and son are murdered. You might want to discuss possibly with other family who this could have been. What does that mean in the courtroom?
That's a good question. I don't know exactly what it means. We've heard that witness give her opinion as to what it might mean. In her opinion, it was odd. We haven't heard Murdaugh discuss what he may have meant, and if he testifies, maybe he'll let the jury know what he meant by that. But this is the kind of evidence that really, I wonder if the prosecutor maybe is over-trying their case. I don't know if I would have put that in, because we don't really know what that means, and you're going to ask a jury to basically extrapolate from that and to speculate as to what it might mean. It was interesting, but I don't think on balance it moves the needle that much personally.
Everyday conversation, you hear that to be the case. You think it's pretty darn odd, but things can be different in the courtroom with a jury. Thank you very much for joining us on that, Phil. Thank you.
You bet. Anytime.